It's your vision. They're buying into it, and you need to keep communicating so they continue to have that buy-in.
Are we thinking and operating off the same playbook? From there, we can work back to, okay, what do we need to do to get there?
They're missing some of those additional components to really solidify and land the plane and really gel that team together for a really strong succession plan.
Welcome to the Total Succession Show. I'm your host, Tyson Ray, joined by Kim Cochenour. We're glad you're here. Subscribe at totalsuccession.com/podcast and let each episode guide you closer to a confident, well-planned exit. Today's conversation just might be the nudge you need to start preparing for what's next.
Most advisors we talk to today are building teams. They're hiring, they're considering internal succession, maybe even bringing in that next generation. What we see over and over again is that building a team and actually making that team work are two totally different things. And that's because there's a lot more going on underneath the surface. How those roles evolve, how the decisions are getting made, and how hard it can be for the founder to let go of the parts that you've built. So we're really excited for the conversation because we're joined by someone who brings a lens and a different lens to this topic. Kaleen Barbera from Jam Consulting is here with us today. Kaleen works with leadership teams using behavioral science to help her teams operate more effectively, especially in high-stakes environment like growth, transition, and succession. Kaleen, welcome. We are really glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Kim.
Kaleen, I'd like you to just start by sharing a little bit about your background and the work that you do.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. I have been in this industry for a very long time, over 30 years. And in terms of the financial industry, and our company was actually born out of the need to learn how to connect better with financial advisors. And so going way back, we began to collaborate because our team knows a lot about sales and leadership, but what are those things underlying that really make the difference, that allow for that connection, that sustain sort of these behaviors and this consultative approach? So we collaborated with organizational psychologists for many years to identify some of those fundamental things that we should be doing. And if we're doing them consistently, we're going to have better connections. And ultimately, that goes into either your team working better together. If you're maybe in the asset management side and working with financial advisors, how are you going to build those relationships, build trust, build connection, and then just growing their practice and helping them grow their practice and having that credibility. So that's what we've done. It's really always, even though it's been for different clients, whether they're in banking or they're in insurance, it's always about the financial advisor. So I've been really focusing on that and what makes that work for many, many years.
And a little plug, part of our success within our own firm came from probably 20 years ago, having Jam Consulting come in and start us understanding how behavior impacts things. And back then it was like behavior. I was thinking like the behavior of my little kids, not the behavior of how we interact with clients, we interact with the team, how we're perceived. And they helped us lay a foundation that we've built our success from. And so we're excited to have them on today.
Thank you. Thanks, Tyson.
So, Kaleen, when you were talking about some of those basic fundamentals, that often doesn't just naturally click into place for teams. So I think we're going to kind of start there. So from your perspective, especially through the lens of behavioral science, what actually is making a team work?
Tyson, what you've done, like we could look at and write books about this. There are so many different things because it's the nuances. And I think to sort of top line it, there are things like structure, asking before telling, recognizing that people really need to feel heard and understood, and then also acknowledging that feelings come before facts. And so many times we're fixated on the task at hand and getting results. And I love to get results. I mean, that's why what gives me the thrill of coaching and training is that I like to get to a goal. It's not just the what you do though, it's the how you do it. And when we're talking about teams working best together or just building a relationship, that has to encompass those behaviors. So whenever there's change, the structure, like the space framework, that is extraordinarily helpful because that gives people guidance.
Mhm.
There is going to be an emotional reaction when there's change on the horizon. And there's change every day really in a business.
Right.
But especially when you're looking at succession, there's change within the mindset regarding the leader. There's change within the team and there's uncertainty. So we have to provide that structure, but then it's the how do we do it? It's the how are you it's not just the vision, but how are you communicating that vision? And so those fundamentals, they go back to just things like asking your team questions. It's the what are the good questions to ask? That's number one. But the number two is how are you engaging them? How are you talking with clients? How are you messaging? Asking before telling, structure, feelings before facts, and then also acknowledging people that they are part of this process too. So those are kind of the fundamentals, and then the how we do those things can really culminate in a lot of different ways.
Well, one of the things I think of when you talk about some of those, that just the simple concepts of those foundational pieces that if they just have the founders might assume that if they have the right people in place, all those things are going to kind of come together more naturally. And so I like the concept of thinking through like, how do people think? How are they going to make decisions? And how is that going to come together in the day to day interactions? And so it's the intentionality behind that I think we can often overlook the importance of in building a good team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what strikes me as just so relevant and what resonated with me in the book that you wrote, Tyson, is just that it's the culture first. So we kind of have to take into account, are we thinking and operating off the same playbook, first of all? And then how are we doing that? How are we having those conversations? What questions are we asking? And you're right, so much is assumed that we have to engage people. And if we can't engage each other in a way that really builds that connection, and that's where the behavioral science is so important, then it's truly difficult to align and reach a common goal. Can't if and as an example, I work with a particular team and the leader constantly wants to tell. They have so much knowledge. They know the answer. And the task that I gave to this leader was it's time to take a mentoring role instead of a telling, it needs to be about asking. And just that again, that concept of asking before telling, now people feel engaged and you can start to build in ownership and accountability. So it's just those little they may seem so basic, but I think that we all agree that very rarely do people demonstrate those things. Or it's the acknowledging that somebody might have a different opinion. That happens a lot with leaders and then their soon to be successors. Their next gen advisor might have an opinion. Doesn't mean that the leader has to agree, but they certainly need to acknowledge it. So again, the simple concept is, are people feeling heard and understood? And then it's demonstrating that. So it's
Mm.
knowing it's the what to do and the how to do it.
Yeah, yeah, that's huge.
So one of the things that I had to be told, um, was, I do it well for clients. I listen, I ask questions, I'm patient. And then I wasn't doing it for my team, and I was finally told, like, I suck as a manager. I I I I realized that I was as the team grew, they were sucking the energy out of me. I was losing patience, and if you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh my gosh," like, asking versus tell, I just wanna tell them what to do and just get over it, and let's get it done, and here's the figures, and And it wasn't until I was encouraged to hire a manager to help manage the people, because the mistake I was making is I was giving them everything that they wanted. You want next week off? Yeah, I have next week off. And then I show up next week and be like, how did I let them off this? Like, why did they even ask? We had these things and it didn't get done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and they, then they pitch you off each other and like mom and a dad and whatever. But it wasn't until I was encouraged to actually hire someone, which was Kim, to come in and actually start managing these things, that we got the consistent communication of getting out of me the vision and repeating it and repeating it and repeating it, because you can't repeat it enough,
Mhm.
and how to teach and what to teach and to whom and to when. So if you're listening to this and you're struggling with your team, maybe it's hiring someone to help come in and manage in ways you're not capable of doing. And so one of the questions I have is okay, how many people is that? At what point, I loved my team when it was 5. When it was 10, it sucked the life out of me. And we're 17 now. We would have never gotten there had I not hired a manager. At what point in the size of a team should they start thinking about bringing somebody in to basically manage the team?
That's a great question, because sometimes then it's too late. I think it's kind of, because what I see is not just with successions, but just teams in general having difficulty working together. So usually a couple of the indicators I would say are, when was the last time you just took an audit of your team in terms of how they felt? How do they rate, handling challenges? And how seamless is that? Does everybody have the same approach with regard to, simple processes like client onboarding and client communication? If you're auditing those things, sort of the day-to-day functions, and then also trying to engage people to say, what is your purpose and how are you feeling about things? And how would you rate that? And if you're feeling like you're getting sort of this passive buy-in, and you can usually, if you're emotionally in tuned enough to pay attention and ask the question and getting that, then you probably need some sort of facilitator to really be the one asking the tough questions and getting some honesty so that you can level the playing field. So those would be the types of things. That's the approach that and generally, I'll be asked to come on board when there is a succession on the horizon, and the leader is smart enough to know that they don't know everything.
Mhm.
If you just don't know everything and you're tired of trying to make everything run, and you have enough, you can put your ego aside long enough to say, okay, maybe I should just entertain the possibility of help. That's a good opportunity to get an objective third party to come in. Maybe you're not hiring somebody and bringing them onto the team, but maybe you're just evaluating or assessing where are some of the gaps that we're having. Are they a misalignment of the culture? Are they, again, do people not understand what the common vision is here? So, it's hard to be living in the day to day like you were, Tyson, and also be stepping back far enough, and when you don't have that time to reflect and you need somebody to do that for you, and you can say, "Wow, I know that there are things that I'm missing. I know that my team just generally doesn't feel like they're either happy or working well or communicating or people are doing things differently." Those would be some of the things that should spark a need or the possibility of asking for help.
To each person, their capacity level or tolerance of complexity could be really different. But I think the feelings, as you were saying, feelings before the facts, can actually kind of
Mhm.
help drive that decision. So I think it's important that we kind of hit on this because it's a little bit more than just the structure that you have built into it. It's really comes down to how the people really operate within it. And so I kind of want to bring to life the concept of building the team. Because as Tyson said, we've gone through that ourselves. I came onto the team in 2019. There were 6, maybe 7 of us on the team at the time. We've gone through a transition time. We're growing a lot of people. So, and I know you listening, you're very similar to what we've been doing. You're growing a team too. So, and the piece that kind of hangs up a lot of advisors, I think, is transitioning the clients to the next gen. How are the advisors starting to let go and create space for others to step in? So, Tyson, I'd love for you to kind of speak into how you've done that, how you've started to let go and create space for others.
Well, I had to hire outside consultants like Jam to help me realize that I had to let it go and let other people come in and help with the relationships. And it was a different consultant, the Jam Consulting, that told me that you need to realize that you care so much that you can hire people that actually can care better than you can for the clients that are
Mhm.
already here, because that's a different when the client no longer has any problems to solve, or the hunting and gathering is over with, the caring for the client is very different. And whether you use a dental practice that has different expertise, or a doctor's office that they have different people that care in different ways, it helped me realize that the mistake I was making was thinking I needed to have a team of rainmakers,
Mm.
when I reached a point, and for succession especially, I needed to have a team of caretakers, because I have all these clients who I have to take care of. And not knowing how to do that well is where resources like Jam Consulting come in and help teach, handhold, run interference, make sure that the team members understand and are affirmed and have their head patted when maybe I didn't do it very well or need to do it better.
Mhm.
Um, so um, Kaylene, tell me how you see Jam Consulting coming in and helping in bringing on team members or helping with those types of transitions.
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually, because of so many, and you even state the numbers in your book, so many advisors are exiting, and you have the great wealth transfer. So a lot of our focus in the past couple of years has been around what are the proper topics to talk about. So what I usually like to start with, and we arrived at 3 different pillars that are important, especially whether it's internal or external succession, it's something that you highlight too, is what are the cultural values and what is the philosophy? So starting with it, and so it's not just those behavioral science fundamentals, but it's the fundamentals of who are we? And does everybody understand that? Because what I'm finding is that even some of the existing team members don't know. It's not clear. So the culture is always the starting point, because that's going to be the foundational piece that everybody goes back to. And everyone's kind of off doing their thing, you come back to, right, what does form stand for? What do we stand for? So that is always the first starting point when helping a team to gel, to either expand or just really operate more effectively and to optimize the talent. So it's a cultural, are we having conversations? It's not
Mhm.
about the leader saying, this is our culture. This is our philosophy. This is our vision. They might say, this is what I have in mind, or this is what I think it is. What do you think it is? Because everybody on that team has to have purpose. And then, so the second thing is clarity.
Good.
And getting part of this is, do we know what we're doing and why we're doing it? And then, because that, then when you get back to the clients and the caretaking, it's so important that the leader is not taking the limelight. It's everyone else on the team knows the value that they're bringing. So that comes with clarity. So that's the second pillar. It's clarity, and then it's clarity in messaging to the clients. But if we don't know who we are and we don't know what we're doing, it's very difficult to say to a client, "Oh, so and so is going to be, doing this." It's more than that, right? It's you are going to really appreciate working with so and so. They are Other clients appreciate them and why they're on this team and what they do best is this. That's the messaging. That's difficult to deliver if A, you haven't thought about it, and B, you haven't really taken to heart some of these other elements that are part of the business and why the clients are there in the first place. And then after that, it's the continuity and it's revisiting those things. So, and for me, that's where I can tell a lot about a team and their alignment if they, I say, okay, what makes you guys different? What do what are the important things that, when you talk about your, you know, advisory team, the such and such wealth group, what do you say? And when they start generating just sort of these very kind of basic, you know, typical, I'm like, time out. We got to go deeper than that because those are the things that it's like, what are the clients feeling? Then that is where you really have something powerful and something, again, in your book, you talk about continuity and it's your
Mhm.
responsibility to build that continuity for clients. It has to come from the recognition of those things. And then how are we going to message it as a team consistently, compelling, concisely, over and over and over again to anybody that joins us, whether they're a new team member or a client.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I think part of that it's helping bring and have that outside perspective because what you said earlier, Colleen, is that if you're sitting down and you're talking with your team and you're not really getting those answers, oftentimes they don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to disappoint the founder. They don't want to rock the boat. And sometimes people have a hard time saying, like, honestly, I don't know what the vision of this firm is, or
Mhm.
can't articulate those types of things. And so it's good to bring in an outside party to kind of be able to come in and ask those questions so that they feel like they can really articulate confusions, questions, or fumble their way through it because you don't want to disappoint the founder because odds are they're there because they want to be there. They're there because they're invested, but they're missing some of those additional components to really solidify and land the plane and like really gel that team together for a really strong succession plan.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So one of the things I think from like a team perspective, if you're listening to this, it's kind of a lot of the clarity. It's going to kind of come from you on roles and expectations, and kind of figure out what does success look like in those individual lanes, because that's going to help your team really move forward. But the question can become really like, how do you actually do that? And so Tyson, you help a lot of advisors think about transition and what's next. I think some of those things you really did a good job of trying to define that in the space framework. So, transition and what comes next. How have you used that to guide advisors? Um, we can maybe even start with the preparation phase.
Yeah, well, I think part of having the team is to let the team know where they're going and also know what do they do if something happens to you, because if you
Mm,
don't they're thinking it if you're not telling them. And
Mhm.
I think part of the biggest part of the space framework is realizing you may not know. And you have to figure, and part of it's kind of figuring that out. But if someone has entrusted you with their life savings, I think you have a fiduciary responsibility to that client in addition to your team if something happens to you. And 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 believe it or not, if you don't know, it's okay to tell the team you don't know, but you're figuring it out or you're working through what these things look like. I think we've seen from other advisors mistakes they've made where they actually have a plan, but then never communicated to the team what that
Uh-huh.
plan was. And then they went to execute that plan, that here this G2 is going to take over this huge note to basically buy out the founding partner, only to find out that G2 doesn't want that debt, doesn't want that responsibility, kind of likes where they're at. And because they never communicated the plan for 5 or 6 or 10 years, and then they show to the door of retirement, they're ready to walk away, and then they have to basically start over or find a different problem, is one of the risks to not defining for yourself what do you see yourself doing, then what do you
Mhm.
need to be preparing to make that vision a reality, and then acting out the rest of space. The Kayleen, in your experience, what have you seen in that regard?
Yeah, well, I wanted to touch on something. The vision part is so important, and that's why we have it as a discussion point in the culture. And the first pillar, it's, what are our values? what is our philosophy? What is our vision? And one of the things, going back to behavioral science part, when people are uncomfortable, let's say there's fear, there's anger, there's maybe embarrassment, something like that, which is why I love this S part of your framework, is that people avoid those things because they're uncomfortable. And that is part of a behavior compass. It's very natural for us to, when we are can't really answer some of these questions we don't know, we are more than happy to avoid it and put it off. So I love that you do that. That's where I like to start too, is what do you see? Let's at least identify maybe something, what does this practice look like a year from now? How will it be different? Starting in those little sort of baby steps to get them to really sit and reflect on, okay, because then from there we can work back to, okay, what do we need to do to get there? And it might be, again, little things. It might be just having a different conversation with the team. Maybe it's recognizing, hey, who I have in the seats aren't quite right. Those are scary. So that vision is, and that S part and the C really is going to predicate all these other elements, the prepare and the act, the commit, all those things. So that's usually where I like to start too, is where are we going? Just maybe even it's 6 months from now. What's gonna be different?
And if you're listening to this and you're that founder and you have that vision, you're probably like me. You don't, because it's in your head and you're thinking about it all the time. You think everybody knows it, and you don't realize how much you need to rinse and repeat and explain and continue to keep that alive in the team's mindset, because it's your vision. They're buying into it, and you need to keep communicating so they continue to have that buy-in.
I just wanna lean into that a little bit. Yes, identifying it and then asking for their feedback too. Do they see it, what, and maybe even some things that you have missed, or that they're even thinking, maybe they're thinking even bigger. So it's such a great conversation, but at the end of the day, you need to arrive on sort of this consistent understanding and commitment, because there could be a lot of changes and necessary changes maybe if everybody's not on board with that. You wanna find that out. And another thing that I appreciate about, your approach too, Tyson, is these things need to start a lot earlier than most advisors expect. You're waiting until the last minute and you're hoping that everything's just gonna fall into place. It's generally, you're more likely for things not to fall into place than to assume that they will.
It's not a one-time conversation. I think and part of what I see in Tyson's book with the space framework and some of the consulting pieces that it kind of ties together, it's an ongoing process. Like you can apply the space framework even when it comes down just to your team members. You can see the need for your team when you realize you can't do it all yourself. You're envisioning what that is. You actually need to do a lot of preparation work to help build and develop and coach up that team. You take action by actually transitioning responsibilities and relationships. You commit to those changes and work through those paces that are uncomfortable. And then ultimately you can exit into that next step in that
Mhm.
succession process because it's not just a one-time thing. We're seeing so many advisors finding a different breath of fresh air and life in their practice when they're able to kind of identify the things that are burdening them, identify the things that are taking their energy, and really training and equipping a team to take those things so there's longevity and less tension in that moment of building a practice for a single exit moment. And so I think that there's a lot of work that can be done, and you need to get out of the mindset if you're thinking I'm going to have a succession plan for my business, it's a one and done. Like it's you're always going to be in a succession mode and it's succession planning in your practice if you're going to do this well.
Agreed. Agreed.
So, Colleen, as we wrap things up, one thing that we always try to make sure we do here when we bring a guest on, like we want to make sure that if they're listening and they want to go deeper on this, whether it's resources or tools or just learning more about the work that you do, can you share a little bit more about Jam Consulting and how you typically work with advisory teams?
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. It depends on, having that first conversation so
Mm.
that we can just evaluate and for me to ask questions. What sort of things do you want to gain? Um, how how is your team operating? Just getting a feel will then help me understand, do we need to focus on really helping the leader first, recognize some blind spots? As Tyson mentioned, that was what the biggest epiphany for him, is just understanding he couldn't do it all. It could be starting there, and it could be just one-on-one coaching. We've done that. We've worked with the specific leadership teams, and then I also will work with the entire team as a group to get on the same page with things. So it can be a combination of that consulting work of me helping, to identify some of the obstacles and then really putting it into practice with either through coaching or even some content training and skill building too. So it's
Sounds great.
kind of all three of those. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So, what we'll do is we'll make sure to include any links in the show notes for people to be able to connect with you. So, you're very easy to find and make sure that if this was like enlightening them, they're like, I need to sit down and talk with Colleen at Jam Consulting. We can make that easy for them to do. So, thank you so much for being here. This has been a really, really hearty conversation. And I think it's provided a lot of good insight for our listeners. Is there, Colleen, anything else you want to share before we wrap this up today?
No, I really appreciate both of you. And Tyson, I have to just commend you for the growth and the vision that you've had and just being able to build an incredible team around you. So congratulations on that.
Yes, well, you guys have been a part of it. So if you're
Mhm.
listening to this and maybe you've had consultants that you basically felt like you had to fit in their box, like they had their way of doing things and you just had to march through it. Jam Consulting would rather come along and understand how they can help fit in your box and make it better. And so I suggest you, if you feel like you need some help in this regard, or like me, you took down some ideas and some notes to follow up on, encourage you to reach out to them and see if they can do for you what they've done for us.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks, everyone. And we'll be back soon with more conversations like this.
These conversations are designed to support your next move, however close or far it may be. Tap subscribe and let each episode guide you closer to a confident, well-planned exit. I've wrestled with these things myself, and that's exactly why I created something to help you do it with less stress and more direction. My book, Total Succession, is now available on Amazon. Inside, I break the process down into 5 clear steps to help you exit on your terms with confidence, full compensation, and your client's best interests at heart. You can also visit totalsuccession.com/podcast to download a free starter guide that walks you through my SPACE framework: see, prepare, act, commit, exit. Remember, you only exit your business once. Create the space to do it well. Thanks for listening. Until next time.